Cam Ward, one of the most successful stories out of the transfer portal last year, I would say. He made some headlines lately, but he said that the playoff sweet spot would be somewhere between 16 and 24 teams. TJ, do you agree?
I mean, as somebody who doesn't like the 12 team, no, I don't want to see it expand
Right.
any more than it already has. I don't like the idea of this. Like, I think people always say like, oh, look at the FCS and look at, you get down to Division II and everything else. Like, they love to say that, and they love that crutch of like, oh, look at this, it's working for them.
Yeah.
Is it really working for them? Because one played 16 and every game in the FCS this weekend was a blowout. Like none of them were close. None of them were competitive. And do you really like who is ranked 20th right now in the country? Like, do you really need to see Oregon play that team? Does that really like, and there's only one way that could happen. And that is the regular season being shortened. They're not going to push this thing out past the Super Bowl by having 6 rounds. And so, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of this. I don't particularly, it is going to expand. Let's be very real with ourselves. Like it is going to go to 14.
The 20th team is Colorado. So just.
Okay, so Colorado would be fun. I'll take that back. I'd take but I mean, Colorado couldn't beat Kansas,
right?
And Coach Prime's fun to watch, and Hunter's a great player.
Sure.
Do you really need to see them play Oregon? Do we? I mean, like I know Colorado's a different team they were last year, but
no,
I mean, Oregon beat them by 1 billion last year. I don't need to see that, right? Yeah. And I don't
even need to see some of the games we are seeing. I like 12 is too many for me, but I just feel like it's like Cam Ward. Sure, you want your participation trophy because you're sitting at number 16. Like I don't know. I don't think we need to see it expand anymore. I think that we have an incredible regular season, and that's part of what makes our sport unique and special is that every game matters. And I was concerned going to 12 would negate the every game mattering, motto that college football has. I certainly think if it goes to 16 or God forbid 24, that you are that's going to happen. I don't need to see a whole bunch of teams with 4 losses in the playoffs. I just don't. And I mean, I don't know. I think it's funny coming from a Miami guy too, because all you're doing is inviting more SEC teams into the playoff. You're going to end up with, 6 of the top 8 being SEC teams. And then we're going to hear about SEC bias from that. I don't know. I don't need it.
Yeah. I got a comment about this today. Somebody told me like, well, 50% of the NBA gets into the playoff and 50% of the NHL. And I think it's like 40% of the NFL, and it's a smaller percentage the MLB has the wild cards now. And so it's a really large number in the MLB too. And you know what all those have in common? Regular seasons that just don't matter, that you just don't care about. Like the Bucks at one point, now I think they've won 5 in a row or 4 in a row. And so they're kind of hot, but the Bucks at one time were like 3-5. And like you could have completely tuned out to the first 8 Bucks games, and all of a sudden they're leading the division, right? And I watch the NBA twice, once on Christmas Day and once in the playoffs. And the same thing with the NHL. Like I'll catch the Lightning here or there, but it doesn't matter. None of it matters until you get to the playoffs, right? And so the thing that all those sports have in common is that their regular seasons just largely don't matter. There's so much room for error. You get if you're Golden State, you're going to make it every year, right? Are you the 1 seed or the 7 seed? I don't know, but just the fighting for that, like it's just not important to watch. And so you're right. Like but even this year with the 12 team playoff, like we had a year where Alabama had 2 losses to Vandy and Tennessee. And Vandy and Tennessee early. Yeah. And those losses didn't matter at all. Like they did not, like there was no cost to losing to Vanderbilt, right? Yeah. And for Texas lost both games to the same opponent, and they still ended up with the 5 seed.
Potentially going to see them a third time. Like that's
just like wild. It did. Now, are the games still fun? Do we still watch them? Absolutely. But I do think that in 5 years, maybe this is a hot take. In 5 years, for these, this is just year 1 of it, right? And so we all we're still in the same.
And the numbers show that it's more popular than it has ever been, even though there are, the talking heads, us sitting here saying like, we don't love this format, but viewership says everybody loves it right now.
Everyone still loves it, but in 5 years, when you've got 3 and 4 lost teams getting in the playoff, will you care as much about that
Yeah.
Tennessee Bama matchup? Now, if you're a fan of one of those teams, or
Well,
like, we'll
and that's
care.
the thing. How many big, like, think about rivalry weekend, right? How many times in just the course of you and I's lifetime has Florida and Florida State played to potentially keep each other out of a national championship game or a Sugar Bowl or, something that really mattered, a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
that is, and that kind of goes away with the way the playoff is. There's not going to be one loss isn't keeping anybody out. So if you've run the table, maybe you can ruin a perfect season, but that end of the game, you've won every single game. You're going into rivalry weekend with those playoffs in sight. That game doesn't matter because if you win or lose, you're going to be in anyway, and that's a weird concept.
Yeah. The Georgia Tech game was completely meaningless this year, right? Like, it did
One
not
of the
mean
coolest
anything.
college football games I've ever seen. But
It was
yes,
amazing.
yes.
And the result literally meant nothing to the
Yeah,
sport. Clemson, South Carolina meant absolutely nothing to the sport this
yep,
year.
yeah,
And so I think that now, are the games still fun? Will we
sure,
still enjoy? Yeah, like, I'm not saying any of that goes
sure.
away, but just the living and dying with every moment. Remember how those Alabama LSU games felt through the 2000s, and you knew that the loser of that game was out, and the winner out, and minus the 1 year, the winner of that game was probably going to the national championship.
Yeah,
That importance of that game, even people were even talking about it with Georgia Alabama this year.
yeah,
Yeah, this game's important, but the loser just has the best loss in the country, and the winner has the best win. Like,
yeah,
that's all that matters. And then they said the same thing for Ohio State, Oregon the next week. And
yeah.
so I don't know. The importance does feel like it's losing its luster. And again, Cam Ward to me just kind of sounds like sour grapes. Like, it sounds like, it should be 16 because we
His
didn't take care of our
participation
business.
trophy is in the mail.
Yeah. You're right, though. It would benefit SEC teams. Just looking at the final playoff rankings, obviously the ones we mentioned, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee would be in, Alabama would be in, Ole Miss would be in, South Carolina, that's 5. And
Mhm,
then Missouri would be in at 19. And
mhm.
then, I guess that would be it. I guess they didn't rank anybody else that high.
I
But
mean,
yeah, I mean, they'd have 6 teams in,
that's a lot of
right?
teams. Yeah,
And so, yeah, if they want to do that, this idea that, like, oh, we should expand. I think people thought that when we expand the playoffs, it'll help the little guy,
it
which,
doesn't. The end result's going to be the same.
yeah,
The little guy just gets a seat at the table for one round. Essentially,
right.
is what it is.
Unless you're going to give, and they would never do this, unless you're going to give 24 teams and you give everybody gets 4 teams in, which would be so stupid. We don't
So
need to do this.
stupid.
Um, it's just going to benefit the SEC and the Big
Right.
Ten more
Well,
anyway. Like,
that's the thing. I don't think whether we have a 4-team playoff or a 12-team playoff or a 24-team playoff, it more than likely, I don't believe, is going to change the final 4 or the final championship game. I think the cream rises to the crop or to the top, excuse me. We know this, right? And it just gives us some more lopsided games at the beginning.
yeah, and it almost could create the TCU effect, where it was great that TCU got in and won their first game,
Mhm.
and then they go to the national championship and
Yeah.
lose by 60.
Yeah.
Like, do we really need to see that? Like,
We
this
also
isn't
call that the
basketball.
Notre Dame effect generally, but
We'll see how they do this week. We'll preview it on Wednesday night. Let's close this thing out and get out of here.
all right, sounds good. Guys, make sure if you are watching right now or you're watching it later on that you are subscribed to this channel, A Peek Inside SEC Football. We want to hear your thoughts below too. And what do you want to hear us talk about? Do you want to hear more about the playoffs? Do you want to hear more about recruiting? You want to hear about the transfer portal? Let us know. Hit us up in the comments. And we can't wait to talk to you on Wednesday.